if they had increased the level of violence sufficiently, they could have won the war in Afghanistan. They were also pointing out, of course, they described correctly, the heroism of the Russian troops, their efforts to bring assistance to the poor people of Afghanistan, to protect them from U.S.-run Islamic fundamentalist terrorist forces, their dedication, the rights they have won for people in Afghanistan, and the warning that if they pull out, there'll be total disaster, mayhem, they must stay and win. Unfortunately, they were right about that too. When they did pull out, it was a total disaster. The U.S.-backed forces tore the places to shreds, so terrible that the population even welcomed the Taliban when they came in. So yes, those arguments can always be given. The Germans could have argued, if they'd had the force, that they didn't, that they could have won the war, the Second World War. I mean, the question is not, can you win? The question is, should you be there?
You say, in talking about Afghanistan, sure, the Russians could have won if they had, could have tolerated the level of violence. What are you saying about Iraq? Do you feel the same way?
It depends what you mean by win. The United States certainly has the capacity to wipe the country out. I mean, there's no question about that. If that's winning, yeah, you could win. In terms of the goals that the United States attempted to achieve, the U.S. government, not the United States, to install a client regime which would be obedient to the United States, which would permit military bases, which would allow U.S. and British corporations to control the energy resources and so on. In terms of achieving that goal, I don't know if they can achieve that. But that they could destroy the country is beyond question.
We're talking to Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn on this Patriots Day that's celebrated in Massachusetts. We're in Boston, Massachusetts, and we'll be back with them in a minute.
I will not go down under the ground, because someone tells me that death's coming round. I will not carry myself down to die. If I die, let me die with my head held high. Let me die in my footsteps before I'll go down under the ground. There's been rumors of wars, and wars that have been. The meaning of life has been lost in the wind. Some people are thinking that the end is close by. Instead of learning to live, they are learning to die. Let me die in my footsteps before I go down under the ground. Well, I don't know if I'm smart, but I think I can see when someone is pulling the wool over me. And if there's a war and death comes around, let me die on this earth, for I'll die underground. Let me die in my footsteps before I go down under the ground.
Let me die in my footsteps. Happy Trauman, Blind Boy Grunt, Bob Dylan. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting on over 500 stations around the country on Pacifica and NPR, low-power FM, college and community radio stations, on public access TV stations and PBS TV stations, and on both TV satellite networks, on Dish Network Channel 9415, Free Speech TV, 9410, Link TV, and on DirecTV Channel 375. And we're video and audio podcasting at democracynow.org. And our headlines are also available in Spanish, in transcript and audio form for radio stations. Take about 150 stations around the world are taking those headlines. As we continue today talking about the state of the world with two of the leading dissidents here in this country. Howard Zinn, legendary historian, author of many books, A People's History of the United States, as well his latest is A Power Governments Cannot Suppress. We're also joined by Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky, linguist at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. His latest book is Failed States, The Abuse of Power and the Assault on Democracy. Howard, you went to North Vietnam. Can you talk about how the Vietnam War ended and also your experience there, why you went?
Well, I went to North Vietnam in early 1968 with Father Daniel Berrigan, and the two of us went actually at the request of the North Vietnamese government, who were going to release the first 3 airmen prisoners, American flyers who were in prison in North Vietnam, and the North Vietnamese wanted to release them during the Tet holiday, also the Tet offensive, sort of as a gesture, I suppose a goodwill gesture, and they asked for representatives of the American peace movement, and so Daniel Berrigan and I went to Hanoi for that reason. And of course, it was an educational experience for us. Noam was talking about, in response to your question about victory and winning, and the question is, of course, why should we win if winning means destroying a country? And there are still people who say, oh, we could have won the Vietnam War, as if the question was, you know, can we win or can we lose, instead of what are we doing to these people? And yes, Noam said, yes, we could win in Iraq by destroying all of Iraq. The Russians could have won in Afghanistan by destroying all of Afghanistan. We could have won in Vietnam by dropping nuclear bombs and killing, instead of killing 2 million people in Vietnam, killing 10 million people in Vietnam. And if that would be considered victory, you know, then who would take satisfaction in that? What we saw in Vietnam is, I think, what people are seeing in Iraq, and that is huge numbers of people dying for no reason at all. And what we saw in Vietnam was the American army being sent halfway around the world to a country which was not threatening us, and we were destroying the people in the country. And here in Iraq, we're going the other way, also going halfway around the world to do the same thing to them. And our experience in Iraq contradicted, as I think the experiences of people who are on the ground in Iraq contradicted again and again the statements of American officials, the statements of the high military, statements like, oh, we're only bombing military targets, oh, these are accidents, when so many civilians are killed. And yes, as Cheney said, victory is around the corner. What we saw in Vietnam was horrifying. And obviously it was horrifying even to GIs in Vietnam, because they began to come back from Vietnam and to oppose the war and to form Vietnam Veterans Against the War. So, you know, we saw villages as far away from any military target as you can imagine, absolutely destroyed, and children killed and their graves still fresh by American jet planes coming over in the middle of the night. You know, when I hear them talk about John McCain as a hero, I say to myself, well, yes, he was a prisoner, and prisoners are maltreated and everywhere, and this is terrible. But John McCain, like the other American flyers, what were they doing? They were bombing defenseless people. And so, yes, Vietnam is something that, by the way, is still not taught very well in American schools. I spoke to a group of people in an advanced history class not long ago, 100 kids, asked them, how many people here have heard of the My Lai massacre? No hand was raised. We are not teaching Vietnam. If we were teaching the history of Vietnam as it should be taught, then the American people from the start would have opposed the war instead of waiting 3 or 4 years for a majority of the American people to declare their opposition to the war.
Now, Chomsky, you went to Cambodia after the bombing.
I went to Laos and North Vietnam.
When and why?
2 years after Howard, early 1970. I spent a week in Laos, a very moving week. I happened to be in Laos